Oh hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster. Welcome to the 5th installment of my ongoing series exploring every runway show by Martin Margiela at Maison Martin Margiela, one runway show at a time. Before we dive completely in, I just want to take a couple of seconds and let you know that this is the 11th weekly episode of Season 4, which means it is the season finale. We will be back in 2020 with more. This season has been far and away my favorite to make. We started the Margiela series in this season and we have gotten a lot of new followers. If you have only been watching this series, you should definitely go check out my other runway analysis. We have ones on Rick Owens and Raph Simmons and a million other people. Most importantly, if I could please just ask that you share this series with cool fashion friends. In fact, wait, hang on. All right, listen, I put a lot of effort into this. Go share this with one of your fashion friends. Or send it to your fashion professor. Do something. Please, I'm being very sweet. Please, thank you. Did you share it with someone? Thank you so much, I truly appreciate it. Enough bliss, let's get started. All of these shows have been in public spaces so far. During the third show, we actually went out about as far as we could go within the confines of the city of Paris. So we're not continuing to go farther out, but this is still very far out from the center of Paris where the rest of Fashion Week is taking place. This time we find ourselves in an abandoned parking garage. The invitations this time were hand-typed on Martin Margiela's personal typewriter. Each one was signed by 10 different members of staff, which included Margiela. This is actually something that we're going to be seeing a lot in the future, is this idea of having a lot of people signing for something or being credited, and Martin's name just being one of them, not more prominent than any of the others. While they were waiting, everyone was served red wine out of white plastic tumblers. I do not drink anymore, and I wasn't a particularly classy drinker when I did, but that seems like a distinctly trashy way of serving wine. For this particular runway show, the way that the video actually gets shot is of a good bit of importance. So we're just probably gonna take this from the beginning of the video and just talk about what they're doing throughout the course of the video in this video. So let's do that now. So we open with this kind of rewinding video montage thing. It reminds me a lot of home movies or security footage. Also, it is tinted blue, and I don't know if it's relevant or not, but blue movies is slang for pornography, so we get some very European art cinema vibes at first, and then some opening shots to establish fully that we are in an abandoned parking garage. And this was a really interesting place for them to have this in. There's no seating at all. Everyone just kind of shows up, is escorted to the second story of the parking garage, and they're just kind of standing around. This seems like a very obvious move, like, oh, everything at Fashion Week is so formal. Let's make it where it's super informal and people sort of don't know what's going on. The problem with that is that every single person who is attending Fashion Week has a fucking crazy schedule. The idea of putting them in a situation where they don't know exactly what's going on is very risky because a lot of them might just leave. And I think in a way that kind of shows how dominant Margiela had become in Paris Fashion Week, is that it was such a cool thing to go to. It was such an important event that everyone kind of stuck around regardless of what was going on, because there was the risk that you were going to miss something really important. Next, we see everyone prepping backstage. This has become a tradition for Margiela at this point. Peeking backstage is no longer peeking at this point. We're in the 5th show where they're giving us some kind of access to backstage. It is now officially just part of the art. As you can see, this footage is moving really fast, and go ahead and get used to that because it's gonna be this fast basically the entire show. So we're not really gonna be able to be picking apart all of the different looks that we're seeing. We're mostly gonna be talking about impressions that they're giving us because that's kind of all they're going to give us. And here it's mostly just this very early grunge feel, this very street smart 90s kind of feel to everything. We're supposed to be in awe that a serious luxury house is going to let us in so intimately into their backstage and into their process. So altogether we have a lot of footage of backstage. There's 7.5 minutes of this backstage prep behind the scenes kind of stuff. So all things considered, it's a lot. When we begin with the actual show itself, we begin by following behind the model Paula Girardi. She's been a Margiela girl from the very beginning. She's gorgeous, but she kind of epitomizes that normal woman look that Margiela pushes for so hard. And what's really weird is that she seems to just be walking. She just kind of turns when she turns. The leader of this fifth runway show, the model that we know to be the Margiela woman, is taking her own path. She was heavily sprayed with patchouli, so her presence wasn't just known because the spotlight was on her and she was beginning the runway show. She was known. If you've never smelled patchouli before, it is distinctive. So there's lots of iterations of this idea of bringing the runway closer to the audience. Of course, there's the very 1980s runway that's this elevated platform where everyone is looking up at the models. That feels very separate from the audience. And then there's some designers that bring the runway down and literally do it on the floor in order to bring things closer and have it feel more like you're in the world of the audience. And you have shows like the early Vetements stuff or the mainline Comme des Garçons, where the audience is pushed side to side so close to the models and the outfits that they're kind of brushing up against them as they walk past. Very uncomfortable, very intimate. Here, the runway is so close that it's hidden. And the models are not brushing up against people. She's literally elbowing them out of her way. Let's spend some time with this. So first, I think that it's worth examining that they're doing this with the camera. We've switched from a lot of quick jumps and behind the scene artsy documentary type stuff to what is called a long shot. All the previous cuts have been 5 seconds or less. Here we are following Paula for an uninterrupted 75 seconds. When I first saw this, I felt so sure that I had seen it in some movie somewhere before, this idea of following behind someone as they kind of introduced you to this whole world. And I think what I was thinking of is the scene in Goodfellas where he's walking the girl through the back of the restaurant and then into the main room so they can immediately get a seat. There's definitely some differences in the setting. Here we seem to be in more of like a club kind of feeling. We're in this parking garage with all these people, and in the other one we're walking through a kitchen. But I do feel like this scene in Goodfellas had a big influence on the way that this was shot because the movie literally came out a few months prior to this video being filmed. Either way, shots like this get used in movies for a very specific purpose. A friend of mine actually sent me a really nice summary of what these are used for. Quote, "Follow shots are typically used in film to establish audience alignment with the perspective of the character being followed and to follow them. The audience is made aware of the character's presence and is able to observe them in action while also being forced to identify with the character. It is considered neither first-person perspective nor third-person perspective." So we get to kind of join in on the thrill of being this powerful woman who starts the show by splitting the crowd and makes room for a catwalk. This is badass stuff, friends. Also, let's look at what she's wearing. Paula is rocking a long denim jacket that's made up of cut up, flattened, and reassembled jeans and jackets. We can read that there was only one closure on them, so the panels of the coat would swing open while she walked, which revealed the permanently creased apron skirts, which we saw introduced in the last show, but there and here we don't have any good imagery of them. Most of them are black or dark navy, and they're like creased, and we just don't have any good photography of them, but they're there. Additionally, you can see that we don't have any current imagery of the original piece that Paula is wearing, because the one in the actual show is a Franken garment with the shoulders that are attached on that are clearly from another garment, while the ones that I'm showing you here in these collections are either sleeveless or long-sleeved. But they do demonstrate the structure of the piece very nicely. After the long shot with Paula Girardi, we get very fleeting views of the rest of the garments. We get literally less than half of a second's view of most of these outfits after that, which is kind of a bummer, but I think, again, the point of this video is not so much to show the garments in their specificity, it's to give you general vibes. And here we do get the general vibe that this is kind of a faded glamour vision of the Margiela outfit. So we'll just keep going in order, and when we see something clear enough to analyze it, we'll analyze it. Here we see a woman in a long dress. I believe that we're looking at a blue dress with a sheer dress laid over top of it. Again, we don't have a lot of footage of this, so we're just kind of going to keep this on a loop so we can get a good view at it. It's similar to what they did for the Spring/Summer 1990 show with the oversized tanks with the sheer layer on top of them, so they got bunched up in a really interesting way. We're now doing a sheer long dress or a sheer long sleeve tee in some cases for other looks over a foundational dress. And my guess is that that foundational dress is probably the lining of a regular dress, which is another theme that we saw introduced the last season in fall/winter 1990. We can see a well-preserved cream-colored example of a sheer overdress here. This is part of the Met's collection. It's a really beautifully preserved piece from this collection. And it's just another really good example of the kind of layering tricks that are done with Margiela that sort of end up becoming the whole house's signature. These elements of styling and good construction that are able to come together to create a really distinctive look. Just a bit after that, we see a tuxedo jacket on our right. A big part of this show is using evening wear, both men's and women's, and converting that to things that can be used during the day. And this is another move that seems very in line with this vision that they've been building of the young, beautiful, broke girl living in Paris and doing fun things with her friends. Hey, we're going to fly kites at the park. Do you want to come? Sure, I'll just grab my tuxedo jacket. I relate to this extremely hard because that vibe was strong when I was in college in Nashville. All rise. This might be the best piece from this entire collection. It's apparently ball gowns from the 1950s that have been split open in the front and had belts added to the inside that they can wrap around your stomach or bust. Then they let the rest of the thing just drag on the floor. Here we see another example of models walking with their SOs. Apparently the model's baby was acting really fussy backstage, so her boyfriend volunteered to carry the kid out alongside her. The design team was cool with this as long as he also wore a white coat. So he did. This, along with the drunk boyfriend from the last show that walked out with his model girlfriend, we're kind of seeing this family values thing get established as part of Margiela's runway shows. And I am 600% here for it. It is completely adorable. And for just a brief moment here, we see two women walking in white dress linings hand in hand. One of them is Christina Deconstructing, and she's another one that's been a Margiela girl since the very beginning. Especially with the organ music that's playing at this part of the video mixed with the flower petals and their hair and them holding hands, this to me looks a lot like two women getting married. So the theme of the family affair continues. Right after the young brides, we see one of the few pieces that we have very good preserved photography of. It's pinstriped and contrasting overlock stitches on a otherwise fairly simple top. This continues the Margiela motif of garments that look like pattern pieces. Besides the really obvious Margiela motifs of showing you all of the structural stuff on the outside of the garment, I think this is a little bit more interesting. If you remember, this is something that we saw in the very first runway show. The concept is so rich, there's a lot of directions that we could go with on this. But I sort of see this as a top that looks like pattern pieces is a top that's saying, I, me, the garment, don't determine what is right for your body. I'm the pattern pieces. It's my job to conform to your body and change myself to fit with you. There's always this idea of like, oh, trying to fit into the tiny little dress or the tiny cute top. But because Margiela was so into the idea of using a variety of ages and sizes and lifestyles of women in his shows, I think this is a piece that really backs up that concept, showing that it's like the piece is not quite done yet. You're the model. Whoever is wearing it, you're the model, and you are the one that the pattern pieces should conform to in order to create the final piece that is your presence. Another item that we don't have a lot of video footage of, but we do have some awesome photography of, is these accessories that every model wore. These are sundial rings that are on black ribbon. Plain black ribbon has been used as an accessory for a number of shows leading up to this one, and this sundial ring might be the coolest non-tabby accessory that they have done thus far. This sundial, also known as a farmer's ring or solar ring, was created in the 15th century based on the work of Johannes Müller von Königsberg. The portable dial, made of 3 rings, 2 stationary and 1 sliding, measured the height of the sun thanks to a small hole in the sliding ring. A beam of light shone through the small hole onto a marking on one of the stationary rings that was set to the calendar date. The sundial, which was accurate within 15 to 20 minutes, could calculate the solar time throughout most of Europe. The ring created for Margiela's show was a faithful replica of a sundial invented around 1720 by monks who lived in a Prussian forest. These are absolutely fascinating objects, and it's very, very cool that they just saw something cool that was historic and said, hey, let's make those. And speaking of tabbies, we definitely had the silver ones that we've been using at just about every show thus far. The variant for this show is these weird sandal tabby mules. So again, the goal of this Margiela video doesn't seem to be to clearly show the clothes that are going to sale. But from the little flashes here and there, we can see that Margiela is here moving more towards a very wearable collection of clothes. If we think back to the second show with the first artisanal pieces, or the first show where a lot of the models just didn't have shirts on, this is a pretty sharp contrast in that most of these things, even the pretty weird ones, seem like something that could just be bought and put on and worn out. Which I'm sure is the result of him hiring more people that are meant to represent the brand for sales, and people that are wait, hold on. Was that Martin? That was Martin! What's up, Martin? Look at him, he's got his little posse of models wrapped around him to make sure he stays hidden. I love Martin so much. As the video comes into its final couple of minutes, we for the first time get to see what it's like to wind down after a show is completed. Everyone is very joyous and full of bubbly excitement. It's a very cool thing to see, this vision that we sort of got a little glimpse of at the end of the first runway show's video, where you got to see everyone clapping and freaking out that they had actually pulled off this thing. Here we get to see an established company at this point being able to celebrate another victory and then hurry home for some well-deserved sleep, so they can start preparing for another show in a few short months. Then we close out the video the same way that we started it visually, with a fuzzy blue screen that seems to be rewinding in some way, and you can hear the names of a bunch of people listed off, and you'll of course recognize one of them. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been the best season to make so far. I have absolutely loved this, and I cannot wait to get cracking on a new season for you people. Again, please go follow me on Instagram and Twitter so that you can follow along with me during the few weeks that I am not putting out episodes. Again, expect new stuff to start releasing every Tuesday morning here on YouTube starting in the new year. I love all of you enough to make out with you at parties, but not to text you consistently. Goodbye.